I would like to say to our audience, thanks for watching the show, Raising the Bar, myself, John Cooper, with Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. Absolutely wonderful guest we've got on today, guys, and you've asked for him, so we brought him on. There's many different things we could be talking about on this show. Dr. Shiva is a colourful character with a very interesting background and story, but we really want to focus on the political aspect today, the false dichotomy of left and right, and we want to ask the question, is there actually politicians that we can trust, or is this all a form of abdication of our own personal responsibility and change-making potential? Because that's effectively what's happening at the moment. Are we being placated into this, believing a superhero figure is going to take care of everything, or is it up to us to do, as Dr. Shiva says, a grassroots, a bottom-up change? So shall we talk about that then, Dr. Shiva? How do you envisage that? And are we saying that we can't trust any politicians at this point? Are we having to change the whole game completely?
What I'm saying is it's not about politicians what's important in life is we always ask the right question. Let's take away the focus on whether this politician is a good person or a bad person, but let's take what I try to educate people on is a systems approach. So in order to educate people on that, since when we ran our United States Senate campaign, in 2018, we ran against a racist woman called Elizabeth Warren, a liberal racist, and we'll talk about why I call her a racist. This is a woman who said that she was a Native American to get into Harvard and all of her jobs. That's racism, using race for political advancement. If you call me whatever name, the N-word, I don't consider that racism, frankly. That's just ignorance. That's not racism. Racism is using race for your financial, political, economic advancements. That's what the definition of racism is. The elites have always tried to take a very deep concept and they try to reduce it to, oh, he called you that name, you're a racist. No, it could just be ignorance, okay? So we ran against Elizabeth Warren. We exposed her as a racist, right? And the campaign was only the real Indian can defeat the fake Indian, which was not, it was a campaign about her integrity issues. This time when we ran, we wanted to elevate the discussion. The slogan, which is more than just a slogan of our campaign, was truth, freedom, and health. Now, those three words is not a political slogan. It goes down to the foundations of how the universe operates on three principles when you study system science called transport, conversion, and storage. Every Monday evenings, I've taken the last 50 years of my work in science, or my 30 years at MIT, where I studied engineering systems theory. And we are starting to educate anyone on this, which is educating people on the science of systems. So those three words, truth, freedom, and health, are directly related to three other words that come in science called transport, conversion, and storage. The transport, the movement of information, matter, and energy, which is freedom. The conversion of, let's say, an idea or a guess or a hypothesis you have to practice a scientific method to find out what's true or not. That's truth. And then once you have truth, you can then find the right problems, right? What the real problems and the real solutions to support the infrastructure of your physical health, your community health, right? Your economic health. And that's what we mean by the structural or the infrastructure part of transport, conversion, and storage or structure, right? So when we built the movement for truth, freedom, and health, it is founded on a scientific universal set of laws. So having said that, if you look at over the last, 100 years, and you can look at this globally, be it in England, be it in India, be it in the United States, wherever, in the 1900s was a massive movement. And I want everyone to really understand this, and you should go study your history. In the 1900s was one of the biggest movements of working people rising up, bottoms up, to demand their rights. If you remember, about the mid-1800s to the early 1900s were the transformation. We were going from an agrarian society to an industrial society. When Marx was in England writing his stuff, or the Paris Commune took place, years before that, or people in India were fighting against British colonialism, or the Susan B. Anthony the 1900s was fighting for women's universal suffrage, right? Or in the late 1800s, you had the Haymarket riots, where 3 American workers were shot fighting for basic wage rights, which, by the way, became International Workers' Day, which is coming on May 1st, right? That occurred that was because to commemorate those workers. But globally, there was a bottoms-up movement of working class people. When I mean workers, if you want to define the term proletarian, it was people actually worked for a living. And many people don't understand that's very different than people who do not work and scam off the state. Okay? In fact, Marx called those lumpen proletarians. In fact, after Marx's death, Engels said the worst people in the world are Marxists. Okay? So the Marxists of today don't care about the working people. They care about the lumpen proletariat, those people who do not work. They want people not working. So when you look at the workers' movements, and if you take the United States movements, women in the mid 1800s are the ones who drove that movement. Much of the center of the Industrial Revolution was Lowell, Massachusetts. One of the early innovators had brought in a lot of the weaving equipment, right? The equipment that ran mills, textile mills from London. And Lowell ended up becoming the center of the Industrial Revolution. Well, people weren't treated that well. It was a horror to work in a factory in those days. It was women who led those movements in the mid 1800s. And those movements grew by the early 1900s. The elites in the United States were so scared. And by the way, all of this has been removed from American history. Most young people do not learn this, unfortunately. Those movements scared the elite so much that they gave concessions. And if you look from 1900 to around 1930, they were forced. A gun was essentially put to the head of the elites, right? People like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which I've repeatedly said was not a nice guy. He was a racist. He was an elitist. He was a complete, and the Democrats and Republicans both colluded even at that time. So, but the force of the militant uprisings, decentralized without any political parties all over the world in the United States of that working class movements, put a gun to the head of the establishment. So they gave people the 8-hour workday. They eliminated child labor. They started giving vitamin A therapy for nutrition, and they started cleaning up the highways and the roads. Florence Nightingale in London, in Liverpool, she was doing a lot of this work too, the sanitation, because it was a filthy place to live in many of the cities in those times. So it was those gains of health, nutrition, education, the highway systems, the infrastructure, the public health infrastructure came at the uprising of working people. And this is something that everyone needs to get really clear in their head. No one gave us this. No one gave you eliminated child labor. No one gave you, hygiene. The elites were fine, you living in filth. They didn't care. So these significant changes came because of working people's names who we do not know, heroes who fought for these rights, who died for those rights. And that's why May 1st, which is not a communist holiday, was originally to commemorate 3 American workers who were shot in the Haymarket riots. Reagan made it Law Day. Everywhere else in the world, May Day is celebrated as International Workers' Day, okay? But, so that movement came bottoms up. And if you look between 1900 to around, 1945, in the United States, and you'll see this globally, the number of infectious diseases, let's say measles, drastically fell from being 14 out of 100,000 all the way down to maybe 1 out of 2 million, but basically it fell by 98%. And that was not because of, the generosity of the elites. It was because they were scared that they were going to lose it all. So that's how we got it. Any gain we have today came from working people's movements about 100 years ago. So that's the first lesson people need to know. So since that time, starting in the 50s and the 70s, again, this happened globally, you can look at it. The elites reorganized. They never, ever wanted to be threatened like that by, ordinary people. So what did they do? They started accelerating the left-right divide, the fake divide. And one of the ways, and they horse traded, they basically worked together. So the predominant way they did this was, first, they attacked anyone. If you or I or anyone listening wanted to organize a bottoms-up movement, they said, you're a communist, you're a Marxist, you're a socialist, right? That was a way of branding you with the hammer and sickle of the capital C communism of the Soviet Union. Not the lowercase c, which about brotherhood or people connecting and wanting something. I'm talking about the capital C of Russian communism or the capital C of Chinese communism. They said, you must be a Maoist. You must be influenced by Russia, right? Not that working people may on their own organic nature want to fight for their own rights. Like that's inconceivable, right? So that's what the right wing did. The left, and they colluded on this. The left said, oh, this is cool. The right has done a great job for us. They're going to make sure people don't organize bottoms up. So we will organize for them, and we will call them unions, okay? Top-down unions, not powerful, the old structured trade unions. So the left took over most of the unions. In England, you have the Labour Party, right? And acting as though they care for working people. But what they did, starting in the 50s, peaking in the 70s until today, was they choked all these unions. They organized workers under some banner of the electrical union or the plumbers union, et cetera. But starting in 1970, the pattern that they did was they negotiated with the elites and they said, oh, we won't strike for you. The union bosses all got paid back. So you don't see any mass strikes anymore, like in the United States. But if you look during 1945 to 1975, you had close to 100 million working people participating in strikes during that period. Well, between 1975 to today, maybe 1 million to 2 million people participated. And you can see the direct effects of that during 1975 to 2018. Working people, not only in the United States, globally, their wages have been massively choked. Today, we have lockdowns, which affected most working people. It didn't affect Walmart. It didn't affect Amazon, et cetera. It didn't affect the elites. The elites doubled their wealth. 600 billionaires doubled their wealth in the so-called pandemic, right? So that's what's taken place. So the reason that background is important, John, for people to appreciate is without the knowledge of that background, what's going to happen is people are going to have this view that the left and the right are somehow different, okay? I don't know when you were young, but when I was young, when I was like 11 or 12, we used to watch this thing called WWF wrestling. I don't know if you have this in English.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So basically you have some guy, he's a character, he'll wear funky clothes, junkyard dog. Some guy will fight some other guy, Rambo, this kind of things. And they would act as though they were enemies. Both are getting paid. Both are getting paid by Vince McMahon, the guy who's running WWF wrestling. But, after a while you realize there's no Santa Claus when you're 11 or 12 and you realize, wait a minute, this is all garbage, right? Well, that is what these political parties are. Whether it's in India, whether it's in England, whether it's in the United States. They are WWF wrestling. They all hang out together. They will maybe have some differences, but whether they have any genuine differences is actually irrelevant. The real issue is when we focus on them, that's what they wanted us to do. So we don't build a bottoms-up movement. So we don't recognize that their bounded sandboxes, where they want us to be participating. Once you're in that sandbox, oh, I support Labor, I support the Tories, I support Republicans, I support Democrats, I support Bernie Sanders, I support Trump. They got you. And you can see this right now. I gave money to Trump, I supported him, but I'd always, he was pretty clever. He was a clever monkey, right? He said enough at a time where he knew the American working class was getting even more disenchanted. And, they tried it with the black guy, Obama, right? So a lot of people voted for Trump, voted for Obama, because they thought he was the hope. So the elites have very, very smart marketing people who do a lot of data gathering, and they watch which way the American working people are thinking, wow, people are really pissed off now. Let's do this. People are pissed off now. Let's use the slogan, make America great again. Oh, let's use the slogan, build the wall. Let's use the slogan, lock her up. To Bernie Sanders, let's use the slogan, revolution, right? So whatever it is, the central goal of the left and right is to make sure that working people never do what occurred in the 1900s, that we do not organize, because that's what scares the shit out of them. They do not want people to organize a bottoms-up movement. So what's critical is, if you look, the example that I've given is, if you look at the eagle in the American symbol, imagine the head of the eagle is the establishment, okay? The shoulders of the eagle are the left and right shoulder, which is the obvious wings of the establishment, very close to the head, right? So you have in the United States, you have Biden and the Clintons, right? Which are the obvious establishment of the left. On the right, you have Mitch McConnell, the guy who looks like a turtle, and Romney, right? Those are that's the obvious right. or John McCain, for example, who's like sort of in the throat or something. He's in both areas. But what's really important to remember is that's obvious. So people will say, oh yeah, you know, the Bidens versus the McConnells, that's also a fake dialectic. But where they're very, very clever is the wings of that eagle. The wings of that eagle need to flap people in to bring them in. So you'll have Trump, you know, act as though he's going after Mitch McConnell. He just called him a son of a bitch or something, right? Or Nikki Haley, you know, saying, I'm not going to run, you know, I'm going to run, right? So the right has their dialectics they create because they want the working people to say, oh yeah, Trump's going to fight for us. So he flaps his wings, which he may even attack the shoulder of that establishment, you see? And the left does it. Bernie Sanders and AOC, for example, will attack Hillary Clinton, or they'll say stuff against Biden. But the entire goal is that entire anatomy of that eagle, right, if you want to use that, is to flap the wings just enough so they talk to keep people within. They never want people, though, to take to the streets and build an independent bottoms-up movement. So starting in the 70s, one of the important things they did was the elites, big academia, be it at Oxford, be it at MIT, be it at John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard, they consolidated a theory called systems theory of systems, which really came out in Western civilization in the 1930s. Systems theory is how you can, there are 9 principles to systems theory where you have a goal. And by the way, I'm going to put this thing, I'll give you a little, we'll take a little brief thing and I'll share this with you. But everyone should go to vashiva.com/join and we'll talk about our Truth, Freedom, and Health movement. But one of the important things is systems theory is the foundational theory of how the modern world runs. If you don't know systems science, you cannot frankly understand healthcare systems, transportation systems, your body as a system, etc. And for me, this has been a long journey. You know, I have 4 degrees at MIT in many different engineering systems. And I was able to interconnect the 1930s or the modern engineering systems theory back to 10,000, 20,000 years ago, that this concept of the science of systems existed independent of human beings. So what has happened is the elites, about probably 5,000 to 5,000 people on a good day, know the science of systems, which is about understanding where movements are going. They observe, they use a lot of computational data analytics. They know that people are upset. They know that the interest rate should be around 6 to 8%. They did the Great Reset because the goal is to make sure working people don't organize bottoms up. But the bottom line is that the elites are very sophisticated and they are trained in systems thinking. And understanding the science of systems is why we're in this situation today. We're here because it was their system by design. And the only way to move forward, if people first of all say, okay, I get it, we need to build a bottoms up movement. I have a lot of passion. I want to do grassroots. But there's not 100 different ways to build a bottoms up movement that succeeds. There's probably 1 or 2, you know, between 2 points, how many ways can you go from point A to point B? Infinite. But there's one direct line, which is probably the fastest way. And that direct line where we can actually defeat and win what's going on is going to alleviate the most amount of human suffering rapidly. And in order to do that, people need to understand the science of systems. So fortunately, you know, I didn't sell out. I remembered where I came from, be it in a poor village in India or working class people in the United States. And everything I've learned over the last 40 years of all those degrees and all those companies I started, but most importantly, I have taken systems theory to a level where I can explain this to people in less than 3 hours, John. And that's step 1. So people need to understand they need to be armed with the same ability, the same science that they have. It's like they have a machine gun and you have an arrow. That's not going to work. You're never going to win. So understanding political systems theory is step 1. Step 2 is recognizing that we need to build once you understand the science, your consciousness is going to raise. So you're going to need other warriors to interconnect with. Well, you can't really do it on Facebook anymore. You can't do it on YouTube. Well, the thing is, you're looking at the guy who invented email, and I ran, you know, we have our own data center here. So I used to host the largest Fortune 1000 companies. I know how to run data centers. So in our own data center, with the support we're getting, we're building our own infrastructure. where in fact we've created our own version of, we call it VA Shiva Social, the own version of Facebook, our own version of forums. And I don't really care to give this to everyone in the world. I want to give it to our truth, freedom, and health warriors. They intersect. And so one is you're educating people on systems thinking. Second, you're giving people an environment where they can interconnect globally. We call it, in some ways, it's like the underground. And the third part of it is we are weaponizing people with tools that they can use to go educate people. So for example, one of those tools I'll walk you through is one of these cards. People can print these cards out. This educates people how to go beyond the anti-vax narrative, for example. There's one on masks. There's one on elections. And on this card, there's a little piece of it where people can understand, right, very quickly, like, what's the science? Well, we need to boost our immune systems. That's what the real issue is. Let's not get caught into this left-right narrative, right? Because you have big pharma on one side and you have the charlatan Robert Kennedy on the other side, who confuses people as though he's against vaccines when he isn't. He says, I'm pro-vaccines. I'm always pro-vaccines. Okay, I vaccinated all my kids. So you have this phenomenon where people want people to be in this pro-vax, anti-vax narrative. They do not want people to be focused on the real issue. And when you apply systems thinking to your body, you find out, oh, wait a minute, my body has an immune system, and the goal is to boost the immune system. Well, how do you boost your immune system? Well, you need sunshine, you need vitamin D3, you need to eat the leafy green, rich vegetables, which give you, vitamin A palmitate. You need enough iodine to support your thyroid. You need vitamin. So you find out there are certain foods that your body can boost your immune. You need friendships. Friendships have a huge effect on, negating depression, which lowers antimicrobials and increases inflammatory. So our goal is we have to educate our people neighbor to neighbor. So people get activated. Our warriors print out these cards. They're not here to go start fights with people. The goal is there's at least 50% of the public who is being taken advantage of. They're not educated. So it's truth, freedom, and health. Let me just show you very quickly. So if you go here, what we've done here is we've created a site, and it says, welcome to VA Shiva, the revolutionary platform to empower you to become an agent of change to win truth, freedom, and health. Take your first step on this educational journey by watching the video. And this video, you mind if I play this?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, play it.
Let me play this, and those of you listening here, some of you may have seen it, but this video is a short video, but it really explains what the foundations of our movement are. So let me play it here.
We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves, because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you, deep down inside them, that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to, and we need to all unite working people. There's only one movement that can do that, and that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the movement for truth, freedom, and health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution, and that's why I put this together. My goal is to train a army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training, because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours, that's what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people. First, with understanding what a system is. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, right? Talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems, fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people, people who work united. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they'll let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers. Completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with as a part of this movement, we're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, You don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people, Dave, to go local, to go local, to go local, fight locally. Forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You've got to learn politics, and there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is a not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is a not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left wing, Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something, or Robert Kennedy, scumbags. Or you're going to follow, some right-wing talk show hosts. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. And that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change. Bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and then look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done. And it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these four concepts I've built into a curriculum. People can go to bashiva.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics, and I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. We need to get educated fast. And within half an hour, I can teach people 2 years of MIT control systems. I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it. Anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. The Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on V as in Victor, A, Shiva, vashiva.com, so people can sign in, they can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there, but we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to VA-Shiva, Victory America Shiva, vashiva.com.
Okay.
I hope that helps. So one of the important things we've done here is people have always asked me, Dr. Shiva, how can I support you? People want to give us money. I don't feel right taking money unless people really want to, I can give something back. So what we've done is when people contribute, they can become a Truth, Freedom, and Health warrior, and we give them educational gifts. So one of those gifts is they get access. This is within our, what we call our data center, right? They get access to videos. Then they get access to, this is what I was saying, these are activism cards. So on every issue like this, and there's many, we've built the science, the legal issues, and this little card, people can print the front and the back, as I shared with you. They're using that to educate people. Some people are very interested in, proper elections. And then they also can take charge of their own health, because these same systems principles, there's another tool that we've created that can apply to understand their health. Another gift we give people is we want them to get trained. I do a 3-hour lecture seminar every Mondays. And then we want them to almost be like professional, change agents. So we want them to put in the effort, and we give them tools. We give them the textbook, we give them other books. And then these are the two tools. We have our own social media. Again, this is for people. And then we have a forum where people can participate and interact in on many different issues, independent of big tech. And then they get scientific reports. They also get the scientific base. Anyway, so people can do that, and people can commit in different ways. And anyone who wants to be a member gets access to all of these if they can't contribute. So we've done it in a way that we've made it so based on people's interest and commitment, they can, take the education that they need. But in many ways, we're literally creating an institute for revolutionary change. That's probably the best way to look at it, right? And we want to be very, honest with people, letting them know that no change simply just occurs. And so where we are right now is we want to build back that bottoms-up movement, but it will require people to study. And the goal is to have around 50,000 people. By the way, you asked, I think when we were doing the pre-interview, anyone can join globally. So we have lots of people in Australia and England and in France and Europe and India here, because ultimately working people have the same enemy. Because today the elites move their money everywhere. And in fact, in my view, the elites are moving their center headquarters was Washington and New York. Now they're going to be moving into probably Beijing and Singapore. Okay, that's the new center that and they don't care whether they're not patriotic to Americans. It's basically where they can maximize power, profit, and control. And I'll be doing a talk later this afternoon on one of the board members on Twitter. Very interesting. This guy called Zalecki, okay? Dorsey was forced to bring him in a corporate shakeup in 2018. This guy is on the board of directors of Twitter. Is, in my view, the guy who really runs the whole thing. Former head of the World Bank. Board of directors of one of the largest funds based out of Singapore called Temasek, which invests at least 1/3 in China. And this guy's, you know, he went to Harvard Kennedy School of Government, Harvard lawyer, trained. It's your deep state elite as you can get. And this individual is the one who's really pulling the strings, the theoretician of the global elites, in my view. Because if you look at Temasek, which is one of these large companies, a third of their investments are in China. So obviously he's telling US policy, China's great, you know, they're actually a good free country, we shouldn't be overreacting, because there's monetary financial interests here. So I want to encourage everyone to get out of this conspiracy theory nonsense, you know, like David Icke talks about reptiles and nonsense. That's what the elites want us doing. They want us to divert our stuff to wacky stuff. We should be talking about follow the money. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Look, as a systems biologist, I can speak about the immune system, but I'll tell you this, when you look at any quote unquote conspiracy around the jabs and the vaccinations, et cetera, it's actually much more simpler. Big pharma globally has lost nearly, like Pfizer has lost nearly 40%, you know, in revenue. In 2011, they made $65 billion. Today they make around $41 billion in revenue. So that's almost $24 billion in losses. I mean, reduction in revenue. They need their next big product that they can't get sued. By the way, you can't sue vaccine manufacturers. That will generate them a market that they don't even have to compete in, because the governments are basically saying, you have to get this. You have to buy this product. Imagine if everyone was told, you must buy a car, you must buy a shoe, you must buy a microphone, right? Great for microphone manufacturers, great for, and that's what's happened with the jabs, right? They're forcing people to get them because the government and big pharma are one. Government and big tech are one. So the key thing we all need to understand is, if you want to change the world and you're serious and you're not a dilettante, then you need to study political scientific theory from a system standpoint. The movement that I've built today, you know, I've created many things, John, you know, in my life, but I can tell you with all humility, the platform that we've built today will probably go down in history. That's my projection. It's probably one of the most powerful technology, community, activism platforms, because what it's telling people is, you are the agent of change, and you need to get off your butt and you need to start studying how the world has actually changed. There are good examples, and that force of bottoms-up change has not existed before. That's why the left and the right have been playing WWF wrestling.
Yep.
So this is where we're at, and we're at here because they have made people fat, dumb, and happy. They've made people not want to build the bottoms-up movements. And that's why we're unfortunately in this situation. We're here because we let it occur, you know, and that's why I think people need to recognize that there's only one way forward, and it is going to demand, if people want to build that movement. Now, my view is we don't need everyone, you know, there are people who will just say, hey, I support Shiva, great, I don't have the time. But my view is it's a number around 50,000. Once you get 50,000 people, that 50,000 people who actually get these, like they will call out on the left a Bernie Sanders. They will call out an AOC. We need to hit the left from the left, and we need to hit the right from the right, if that makes any sense. Right? Trump talked a good game, but Trump wasn't Trump. He brought in deep state people. He brought in Jared Kushner, right? Look at all the people. Trump had 4 years. So now he's on his new shtick. He will attack the Republicans. Well, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That raises money, right? To keep the Trumpers still thinking Trump's a anti-establishment fighter. Bernie Sanders does the same thing. Nigel Farage does the same thing, okay? They just say enough. But at the end of the day, fine, they can be whatever, creating their theater. Watch them, by the way, if you want entertainment. I'm not saying don't watch them. If you want to be entertained, do that. But don't say that they're going to be agents of change. They're not. It's not in their DNA.
Can I come in at this point? Thank you for that. That was one of the best bits we've captured there in the whole series of our shows. You mentioned before about the WWF characters. I mean, that is, for me, I think they talk about that in terms of the baby face and the heel. So you can't have two of the same sort of characters coming on, because it wouldn't be as enticing. So they have the heel, the bad guy, and they have the baby face, the good guy, and
Right.
they play those off against each other. And that's what actually keeps people hooked. And in a way, that's what's happening politically. And you kind of emphasize that there. I would like to.
Gore Vidal said it's interesting, right? He said that politicians are basically ugly celebrities. Okay.
Yeah.
They're in a theater, but they're just uglier, right? They don't look as good. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you also see this with celebrities. So thanks for mentioning that, because I was going to say, you have someone like Russell Brand, for instance. He appeals to the working class man or woman. He came on an interview of Paxman, who's a BBC presenter, quite a tough guy in his style. And Russell Brand came on and said, we need to get out the left-right paradigm. We need to get out of that. They're both as bad as each other. I think he referred to it as, it's like choosing between a Chinese burn and a fart in the mouth, or something like that. And then the next week on his own YouTube channel, he says he invited Ed Miliband on, who's a Labour, running for Labour leader. And then he was convincing everyone to join Labour within a few weeks of that. So he almost played the Pied Piper role of pacing and leading where people were at. Yeah, Russell Brand. So pacing and leading where people are at, and then slowly starting to move them.
Exactly. Yeah, so I hope everyone listening to John, that's a great example, because this is how sophisticated they are. When I say systems theory, they know the trends. Russell Brand is just, he has this beard. He thinks he's a guru, right? He's a nut, okay? This guy does not know political theory. He sees that his other career wasn't going well, so he needs a new career, okay? I have a full-time job. I do this as a public service because I integrate it with what I'm doing, right? But I have to work for a living, right? What I do here is not my source of income. For those guys, it is their source of income. Like, it is their existence. So what's important to understand is that working people typically do not get political. I'll give you an example. If you look at the remember the Egypt movement that took place around 15 years ago, the Arab Spring? Well, typically what the establishment wants is they want the kids, right? Okay, they can protest, right? Students can protest, they can be radical, right? They can grow their hair long and act crazy and be left or right, right? And those movements are allowed to grow. So if you look at in Arab Spring, all these students were social mediating, and they were having huge gatherings in Tahrir Square. And the establishment let that go on. But when working people said, oh, we want to go support that movement, and they struck, that's when Mubarak made one phone call to Vodafone and they shut everything down. They do not want working people to leave their jobs and get activated. When I ran for US Senate, 90% of our movement, or probably more, was everyday working people. It wasn't students who were Bernie followers. It was an in thing to do, right? They had their trust funds, right? So they do not want working people. It's very important to understand. They do not want working people getting political. They want working people working away. Yes, students can get political, right? Politicians can be political. Celebrities can be political. But they do not want an electrician or a plumber or a hardworking mother saying, you know what, I'm going to do a work stoppage. What would happen? Look, in the United States, out of the, let's say, truckers who move most of the goods, only 10% of them, 15% of them are organized by the unions. The other 85% of them are independent small businesses who move most of the goods. What would happen if they became part of a movement? Think about the political power that would happen if the Amazon or truckers didn't move goods. You could overnight say, screw you, government, this is what we want. You could issue demands. You see? And what's happened is that's what they don't want people doing. What would happen? I've always given this statistic, okay? You know, there's probably, let's say 100,000 network engineers in the country, okay? Or in the world. People who control the networks, who know how firewalls. What would happen if they all organized? And they said, you know what? We don't like GMOs. We don't like forced vaccinations. We don't like this. We're going to strike. It's game, set, match. It's over. You see? You don't need to win elections to have this kind of political power. And say they do not want people recognizing the power we have if we organize independently. So that's why the labor movement, the right wing needs a labor movement to keep the workers in check. The right needs the left to control the labor movements. So it's the establishment has the right, support the left in consolidating labor movements, centrally controlling them. Because and the right helps the left do that by constantly saying, when working people organize independent, oh, you're a Marxist, you're a communist, you're a socialist, you're a radical, right? And therefore, working people say, oh, I guess I can't do that. They're going to brand me. So they go join these unions, which are controlled top down. So it is going to be ultimately people with skills, people who work, when we organize and we do what occurred in the 1900s. In India, the same thing occurred. Working people were organizing in the 1920s because they wanted a good revolution. And that's when they dropped this guy called Gandhi in. Gandhi was a complete racist, complete casteist. Put him in his, white garb, gave him some spectacles, theater, and they used him to talk nonviolent nonsense as though it's okay to get your head beaten in, right? Convince people, brainwash. I mean, you have to shove that down people's throat. Like, yeah, when police beat you up, yeah, take a beating. Yeah, right. So Gandhi was theater used by the British. And what did he do? He didn't support a real movement of the bottoms up people. They suppressed that. They moved the people off the streets into things called legislatures, where the people haggle. You see, when they have them in the legislature fighting in a little controlled parliament, they can control the whole movement, right? Because now you can say, oh, you know what, let's pass this bill, let's do that. So what happens is human suffering continues to get prolonged, right? That's what happens. So what we fundamentally have is they do not want people building a bottoms-up movement. So anyone listening out there, if you want to build a bottoms-up movement, step one. Step two, when some people do that, they say, well, maybe I can go join the Labor Party and change the system from within. Bad mistake. It's never going to happen. They control it, right? Oh, Russell Brand says some good stuff, right? Donald Trump says some good stuff. Well, are they saying that we should build a bottoms-up movement? Are they telling people, teaching people how to do that? No. Do they have the skills? No. So I would say right now in the world, our movement for truth, freedom, and health, with all humility, is the only movement which has put it all together. It is the only movement that is providing people the infrastructure, providing people the training, and bringing people together independent of big tech, and giving people actual things to do on the ground. And we have people printing out these cards. We have a mask card. They go to educate people. For example, you go to a worker who's working at a Starbucks. You say, look, do you know those masks scientifically are going to cause your tooth to decay? Here's the research. Because you're going to increase 3 microbes in your mouth, which will contribute to oral mishealth. Well, your oral health controls your brain health. It controls your immune health. It controls many health systems. So fine, if your employer says wear the mask, wear it. But you know what? Tell your employer, here's a letter I'm going to give you, employer. You better give me dental insurance. You better give me more teeth cleanings. If I have to go get serious deep cleaning work, you should pay for that. You see, now we are going bottoms up. What's happening today is the government tells all these businesses, oh, you better make sure your employees do this, this, and this. And the employers, most of them are pussies. They say, oh, okay, we can't do anything, right? They pussyfoot around. And the employers don't stand up for anything because they're liable to lose their licenses, et cetera, right? So the workers, they say, well, you got to do this, you got to wear this, you got to get, jab. And so we need to put the pressure bottoms up. What's going to happen when the employers say, oh, I may have to pay another 20 grand in liabilities if my employee here, his teeth fall out? I've just gotten a letter from him. That's what we're doing. And when you start thinking bottoms up, you come up with creative solutions. When you think, oh, should I vote for Trump or Bernie? You come up with WWF solutions, right? You become buying tickets to their popcorn game, and you basically become a fool. So the real question, John and everyone listening, is, do you want actually liberation? Do you actually want truth, freedom, and health? Are you lying to yourselves? Do you want to get off your ass and really change the world? Because if you do, we have the solution. The solution is training, building community, and getting activated on every one of these issues. So in many ways, I view what we're doing like I'm like the weapons manufacturer, John. The weapons we're creating is powerful tools which integrate scientific science, legal, and media on every issue. And without that, forget about winning any movement. You might as well just bullshit yourselves and just keep whining. But if you want to, we're having victory after victory in what we're doing. Small victories, large victories. You know, why is it that I have no legal training, have 2 lawsuits that have gotten multiple victories, and Trump lost every one of his lawsuits, and he raised $300 million. The issue is, was he raising money for himself and the RNC, or was he really interested in fighting? He wasn't. The fact is, he had Jared Kushner in there, who's a complete little, you know, rich boy whose father got him to Harvard here on $2.5 million. He ran slums here. That's who Jared Kushner is, okay? That's who Trump had in the White House. I mean, what the hell was he doing? You couldn't find anyone else? So we have to go understand we cannot be part of any cults, right? Russell Brand, complete charlatan, talks, and then tells people to go to labor, right? There you go. They're basically the wings of the establishment shepherd people back into the establishment. So they'll say enough radical stuff to bring people in. And this is where people got to get bright. You know, Robert Kennedy goes around looking for big rallies where he can insert himself. Meanwhile, he endorsed Hillary Clinton 3 times, who's vaccine queen, who loves GMOs, who loves Monsanto. You know, and then he talks like this, my family did this. Your family did shit. Your family's part of the establishment. You're part of the establishment.
And he pushes climate change as well. You'll often find him pushing a lot of the climate change stuff as well.
Right. So, but people need to realize we have a lot of very wealthy women who want to suck whatever Robert Kennedy's whatever, right? When I came out as a scientist, I said, look, the real issue is we got to move beyond vax and anti-vax. The real issue is boosting the immune system. I was beloved by all these people who never had a scientist. But the day I started attacking Kennedy, these same wealthy white women who want to give a lot of money to Kennedy thought I was a devil. But now, after the constant education, 70% of people recognize that Kennedy's full of shit. But you see, it's not that hard to break people away. Same with Trump. I mean, I supported Trump, gave him money. It was hard for me to realize that he's the reason we're in this situation. He made it possible. So the American working class waited for him for 4 years. 4 years we waited. Oh, he plays 9th dimensional chess. He's so brilliant.
Trust the plan. Trust the process. Yeah.
Yeah, trust the plan. Trust bullshit. He didn't do anything to Hillary Clinton in 4 years, not one thing. So people need to realize that if you want entertainment, Trump, Bernie, AOC, climate change, Kennedy's, that's what they're about. Billionaires are not going to change your world. It's going to be people who work bottoms up and who have a history of doing that.
Yeah.
So this is the hard truth. So I'm asking people to get serious. If you're serious and you want to change the world, we have a way to do that. But it's going to begin with you being honest with yourselves. Don't bullshit yourself. Don't tell everyone you want to change the world and blah, 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 and get into one of these wings. In today's world, in 2021, if you're left or right, Labor or Tory, whatever it is, you're basically a child. You're like a child politic. You're like a kindergartner, right? And that's where they want you to be at. But if you want a PhD in political change, then you should join the movement for truth, freedom, and health, because that's what I've spent my whole life figuring out. So you have the guy who invented email. You have the guy who got all those degrees from MIT. You got the guy who came from nothing, who's figured this out. And that's my life's journey. And if anything, that's my gift to people. And so the issue is, do people want to be serious? Do they really want to wield the sword? You know, the symbol we use is a trident, which is a Navy SEAL symbol, which is a symbol of a bunch of, but the trident is a spear that pierces darkness and it lets in the light. And that's what this is about. Do you want to bullshit yourself and be in bondage and enslaved, or do you want to get educated? That's where it starts, John. So I hope this is valuable.
Good
to
man.
your
Very,
viewers.
very valuable. I would just like to just ask a couple of things just to troubleshoot that for a lot of people that are listening to this. Dr. Shiva, how would someone be able to identify a true grassroots movement just by looking at it, just by observing it? Because there's obviously been
Yeah, it's a great question.
seemingly grassroots movements that have actually been top down, but packaged in a way that looks like a grassroots movement, like Black Lives Matter, for instance. How can or Occupy movement is another one.
Yeah, so the way you can understand if a movement is truly bottoms up, here are some features of that movement.
Yeah.
Number one, does that movement encourage working people to strip away from both political parties? Number one. Number two, does that movement have uncompromising commitment and articulation to attack not the obvious establishment, but the not so obvious establishment? So when you have people calling out the Robert Kennedys, when you have people calling out the Trumps, when you have on the left and the right, the Bernies and the others, remember, it's easy to knock the shoulders of the eagle, but have you figured out how AOC is a hypocrite? Have you figured out how Bernie Sanders is a hypocrite, right? Have you figured out how Russell Brand is a hypocrite? When you start calling them out, that is one of the hallmarks that movement has a political consciousness to win. I'll give you an example. In the anti-war movement of the Vietnam War in the 1960s, when that movement started, right, the U.S. invades Vietnam, right, goes all the way halfway around the world and made this poor, small country because they wanted to sell, frankly, more weapons. Well, when the movement first started, the movement was literally a left-wing movement, the feathers of the Democratic establishment. The right wing had a guy called Barry Goldwater, who was a shoulder, right? And he wanted to start wars with everyone. So the left would brand Barry Goldwater as the pro-war warmonger, okay? And so, starting in 63, 4, 5, as the anti-war movement built, it was typically a left movement branding the right as pro-war. But the reality was Democrats and Republicans were both pro-war, right? But the left wing of the Democrat establishment never attacked its own shoulder, right? It was basically attacking the right, and the establishment Democrats loved it. Well, now there were more politically conscious people who were saying, nah, it's the left and the right, and they were considered a minority. They're both pro-war, and they would give examples how both Democrats and Republicans have started every war together. In fact, Democrats have actually started more wars than Republicans. Both suck, but Democrats have actually started more. So what's interesting is it was not until 1968, there was a guy, Lyndon B. Johnson, who was running for president in the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where it was taking place. On the stage of the Democratic Convention, Johnson had machine guns. Why? Because there were protesters outside that Chicago Convention Center, outside. These young protesters who were typically the left liberal, fighting the anti-war movement. Well, as that protest grew, the police beat the shit out of these protesters. That's when it took that beating for those left protesters to realize, wait a minute, this was done at the Democratic Convention. Lyndon B. Johnson is also pro-war, and he had just bombed Cambodia. So it took nearly 10 years for them to wake up and realize, wait a minute, both parties are pro-war. Both parties are profiting from selling weapons, okay? And when the movement broke from the left and the right, within less than 16 months, that war ended, all right? So this is what I'm saying. The characteristics of a true anti-establishment movement will be, do they attack not the obvious establishment, but the not so obvious establishment? Like, people will tell me, and more people are getting smart now.
What if they come after you, though, Dr. Shiva? What would you say to them? Do you know what I mean? If they're applying that same logic, but then they might call out people that actually are genuine. What's the differentiation? They're just discernment, or is there actually a way that we can give this?
Well, the critical thing is, what do you do? How do you live your life? Right? Are you make stuff? I make stuff, right? What have you done your whole life? How do you actually have you put your life on the line? I mean, when I went back to India in 2008, I was recruited by the Indian government to run one of the. I mean, you look at my life history, right? And I mean, since I grew up as an untouchable in India, I've been trying to figure out political systems. There's a picture of me protesting the war at my PhD graduation. I organized food service workers when I was 18 years old at MIT. I fought to make sure more blacks and whites came to places like MIT. I fought my entire life, in addition to doing science and engineering. Bottoms up. So you have to go, people have to be intelligent. People should question anything, everyone, including me or anyone. But most importantly, people need to understand that is the movement, are people encouraging people to build a bottoms up movement, which is people organizing independently in their local neighborhoods. Like the reason we do these cards is we want people to go to your neighbors. We're not, people say, oh, let's go convince the state rep. I said, screw them. Go talk to 10 of your neighbors. That's a bottoms up movement.
Right. Yeah.
It's very, very different.
Because can I just come in just quickly, just to say that, because a lot of people turn up to these Unite for Freedom protests, they're happening all over the world right now. And the numbers are getting quite huge. We had about 200,000 people in London on the last one. I imagine there's going to be a lot more, the one coming up on the 24th of April. But I would say that even that can be a trap, because you have all these people going along. There's a feeling of everyone's got my back. So in a way, it makes people not take personal responsibility.
Well, you have to understand.
What we really need is for people to stop listening to these speakers. We know the truth already. We know what's going on. What we need to do is people to break off into their own little groups, like you say, get the mums together, get the people, the business owners together,
Exactly.
and get all the people that want to go into shops without their masks together, and all mobilize into groups, and then like break into smaller units, and then go at it that way.
Right.
Just talking about it and just patting ourselves on the back and having a bit of solidarity is great to begin with, get yourself a bit of confidence, but now we actually need to get serious about it, don't we?
Yeah, so it is actions, right?
Yeah.
So what we're doing, for example, on the election integrity issue, right? So you have to have the three things. You have to have the training. So think about, you have to, it's like you have to have this scholarly training, which people don't have. So a lot of these people go into these movements, people give them signs to hold up. It's all orchestrated, okay? Like the March on Washington with Martin Luther King was very well orchestrated by the Kennedys and the Southern National Christian Conference. They know as the masses get angry, they will actually orchestrate big protests, controlled protests. It's like a controlled reaction. So number one, people need to understand this political theory. Number two, they need to interconnect with people who understand that high level of political theory. Number three, they need to go do actions locally. So for example, on the clean elections thing, what are we doing? This is a distinctive feature. Every week we have people who want to get educated, so we teach them. We say, this is what you can do in your local precinct. Go to your local town clerk, ask them for two pieces of information. How many people voted in the last election, the actual list, and the actual ballots? Well, those two numbers, A and B, better match. If they don't, we will teach you how to file a lawsuit. That's what we're doing locally. What's our solution? We need to move to hand-counted paper ballots. You see, very different. So if anything, what we're doing is there's not the concept of the leader, it's more the word catalyst. And what's happening, so the infrastructure we're providing is almost, hopefully, is going to catalyze people. Okay, I got the training. Now I know what to do. Okay, I have some tools. And now people get confident. Oh, I filed this lawsuit here. I won, right? I had a small victory. You see? And that is what we need to do. So our movement takes a systems approach, because when you study systems theory, you realize that there's a concept called self-organizing system. A guy won a Nobel Prize on this in the 1950s, a guy called Pergroni, that if you take a pot of oil, and what he noticed was that when you start heating that oil at a certain temperature, at a certain point, it's all random. But once the heat gets to a certain point, the oil forms these beautiful hexagonal tessellation patterns. It's called a self-organizing system. It's and that's how I think nature actually operates. You keep heating it to another level, it'll go random. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to create, with the movement for truth, freedom, and health, provide that catalysis. So you get enough people that it will become a self-organizing system that I can't even predict what form it'll take. It's not for me to predict. That would be fascism, that would be top down. But we want to essentially be the person who's cranking up the heat, or when you're doing certain chemical reactions, you throw in an enzyme, right? And it catalyzes that reaction. So if anything, we want to be the catalyst. And that catalysis process will create something where I can't even predict what's going to be. But I do know getting people to catalyze themselves is a way to win, for them to be the catalyst within their own local communities. But they do what I just shared with you. They need to understand this political theory.
Yeah.
So it's almost a recursive process here. We're trying to tell people this is how nature actually works. It works on this principle called self-organizing systems. Now, having known that, you can actually be a catalyst to catalyze that self-organizing system to take place.
Well, what does the end goal look like for that? Do we even know what the picture of that looks like? Is it a
know.
displacement of government,
or
or do we not even think about that at this point?
I think it's a wrong question, because
Right.
I think that the issue is, right, like the old model was, you have an end and you have a means. And then people say, well, the end justifies the means. Well, that's why most revolutionary movements fail.
Yeah.
Because people say, okay, we need to get into power. Okay, so they do whatever it takes to get into power. But the means that they use to get into power ultimately is like the Ouroboros tail, it eats you up, right? So if you say, okay, in order to get into power, we need to be this elite group of centralized people. That's what happened, I mean, in the Soviet Revolution. First, it was a bottoms-up movement. The Leninism had some very powerful features, but they never devolved power back to the masses, right? So their own success actually destroyed them. So here, what we're saying is the end and the means are the same. The end is the movement, and the movement is the means to create the movement, okay? So the goal that we measure success is how many people are out there distributing cards on their own? How many people are actually saying, okay, you know, I'm a working class person. I'm going to educate my neighbors on why these masks are bad. I'm going to take some of these weapons and I'm going to start using them. You see, that is how we measure success. Now, how that evolves, I mean, once you get to 50,000 people, I'm telling you, I can't predict what that will evolve to, but I'll tell you, it'll be a mixture and a reaction that the elites will not know what to do with, because now you've let the genie out of the bag. You've taught people things that you can, like when you learn a language, right? Or when you learn a skill, it's hard to take that away, right? Your brain has it. I mean, you have to practice it, right? But that's what the goal here is. There is a skill to affecting change. There is, you have to go and understand chemical engineering. You can't just go mix stuff together. The goal is to educate people. Now, if you get enough people educated, it's like the oil in that pan. How it forms, I can't predict, and it's not for me to predict. The old model would be say, yes, I'm the leader of a movement, we're going to do this, and then we're going to get here, and we're going to have this utopia. Bullshit. We don't know. But what we do know is we do need to have people learning these concepts, right? Once, for example, when Maxwell and Faraday created Maxwell's equations, right? We understood the principles of electricity and magnetism. Okay, then after that, we created people called electrical engineers. Could we have said, oh no, we're gonna create electrical engineers to go build, I don't know, rockets to the moon? No, we couldn't even predicted that, but the goal was once you created electrical engineers, they created things that computers and things we couldn't even think about. You see what I'm saying?
That's what organic means. That's to be a organic grassroots movement.
It's wild.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Wild.
Innovation is wild. That's why the invention of email bothers them so much. I mean, I created email as a 14-year-old kid before I came to MIT. The invention of email, the invention of great things does not occur in centralized model. They want to make innovation, for example, like genetically engineered food. You centralize it. Well, as a 14-year-old kid, I was solving a civilian problem in Newark, New Jersey, which is predominantly African-American, one of the poorest cities in the United States. And here as a 14-year-old kid working in a medical science institution, I wrote the first code to convert the old-fashioned inter-office mail system where secretaries were typing away on typewriters to create memos and carbon copies and inbox, outbox. I moved that entire system to the electronic version, named it email, I got the first copyright. Well, that occurred before I came to MIT. You see, this is a danger to the elites because it's saying, oh, you know, innovation is actually completely a wild seed that instead of spending billions of dollars in places like MIT and Silicon Valley and Imperial College or Oxford funding the elites, and these are the centers of innovation, what would happen if you just threw a couple of $1,000s all over the world, like just throwing, you know, seeds everywhere? We would have a jungle of incredible innovation that we don't even know about. So that's what the goal here is. We want to create a movement for change where people understand these principles. That's the seed, okay? How they use it, it is not for me to be in a position to dictate, because that would be antithetical to what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's about the blades of grass interacting with each other individually, and then it can ripple out from there. It can cascade out from that.
It's not even ripple. It'll create a reaction. We don't even know what that'll be. But think about if you had, I would say in UK, if you had like 5,000 people who understood system science, who understood what I'm sharing with you today, those 5,000 people could each reach another 1,000 people, right? 5 million people. And that's the goal. But the last thought, I've shared before is that, look, theory precedes action. Thought precedes action, right? The finer your thoughts are, the more refined your thoughts are, the more explosive your actions are. You can have very rudimentary actions, right? Okay, we're going to burn 1 billion trees down. I need to fuel all these villages. Okay, you cut down all the trees. Okay, because you burn a tree, you get carbon. Well, then one guy sitting over there is looking at energy and matter, and he says, you know what? Energy and matter are interchangeable. E equals mc squared. That's a theoretical framework. And if I can hit an atom right in the center, it'll create a chain reaction where a little bit of plutonium like this will generate more heat and energy than burning down 1 billion trees. Well, how did that come? It was a scientific theory of energy and mass are interchangeable. And then the engineering science of figuring out how to hit that atom, or the nucleus, right? That's what we're talking about here. You could be burning down trees all day to try to generate heat, but if you understand that scientific theory, that now enables you to take a little bit of this and have an explosive effect. That's what we're talking about. We could just say, oh yeah, 1 million people showed up in Berlin today for a protest to hear a bunch of idiots speak and to get them all passionate, and then they all went home.
Exactly.
What just happened? Nothing. But if 50,000 people understand what I'm saying and they don't go up to, I'm not saying don't protest. I think they're very good, but for what purpose? But if they tell people, look, I need you to go into your local community now. They educate people. Let's go local. Let's talk to our neighbors. Let's have face-to-face conversations again. Yes, you have the left and the right. 30% of people are never going to agree with anything you say. 20% will be the echo chamber. But our goal is to educate the 50%, right? And that is how the world changes. The end is education. The end is people getting activated. That is the end. The end is not, okay, we're going to pass this law or this bill and corral everyone into this one focusing. No, the end is to educate a enlightened citizenry. That's true democracy. So that's what we want to do. How people want to use that, it's up, I'm not, who am I here to say that, right? The problems are so diverse. It would be like, that would be fascism, right? Saying everyone in every community should live like this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just planting the seed with people as well, not forcing people to, you have to plant the seed. You can maybe come back and water it a bit, but it's up to people to also to educate themselves and take responsibility and learn themselves,
Right. So right now we have 1 million people who are just burning down trees, for example, thinking that's the way you get heat. But let's say there's probably about 50 nuclear physicists in the world who know how to, generate fission, right? And probably few who know how to generate fusion, right? We should ultimately be, you see what I'm saying? So if you can have more people understand this engineering scientific basis of movements and change, you've now helped a whole generation of people, and you've reduced the time to have. The goal is, in my lifetime, we want to see change faster. We don't want to wait 20 years of, okay, I supported Trump for 20 years. Oh, now I supported Bernie Sanders for 20 years. Okay, now I'm so confused, right? I think the world sucks. I'm just going to go home. I'm going to just get my little plot of land. I'm going to plant my little berries, and I'm going to live with the birds, and I'm just going to do my yoga, right? And I'm going to meditate, and that's what I'm going to do, because the world can't change. That's what they want people to do. They want people to get burned out following the left. They want people to get burned out following the right. And then they eventually want you to get depressed, and they just want you to be an automaton in their machine. They want you to feel like you cannot do anything. And the way they do that is to giving you the wrong political theory. That is the end goal, John. And if the sooner people understand that game will lead you to depression, lead you to whining, and then some people will lead into believing aliens are going to come change the world, or there's some galactic universe. There may be, but it's irrelevant to what we need to do right now.
Yeah, and also the I would call it spiritology is another trap where people just go and meditate and up a mountain and hug a tree, but they think that that's all they need to
Well,
do, with
well,
abdicating again, absolving them of their own proper change making
look,
potential.
yeah. So I mean, the symbol that Shiva has this thing called the
Mm,
Trishula, the trident.
mm,
The uh, um, it's the Navy SEALs have it too, but I love it because what the trident is, it's basically the warrior and the healer. You see, in traditional systems of medicine, there was no distinguishing between the warrior who fought against evil and the healer who fought against death. They were both fighting against death and darkness. Healer and warrior won, but what's happened is you have these idiotic people who go to India, like Russell Brand probably met some yogi and thinks he's a yogi, and they do some meditation, blah, 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 and think, oh yeah, you have to talk a certain way, very slow, and then you have to be spiritual, da, da, da. And they have a theory on what it means to be a healing spiritual human being.
just accept.
Except, da, 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 right? And then over here, you have people who say we have to fight and be a warrior, and then those people are seen as crazy, aggressive people. Well, the truth is, if you look at the archetypes of the things that actually changed, they were connected. So they were one. The person who fought with aggression for righteousness was the same as a person who was a healer. Because if you actually want to fight death, you have to have a certain amount of resilience and commitment, right? And so the symbol of the trident, that's what it is. It's a symbol of, an interesting symbol in the Eastern and Western tradition is you have the Archangel Michael in the Christian archetype, who's known as the angel, the archangel who's for health and healing, but he's the one who also chased out the devils out of heaven, and Lucifer out of heaven. In the Indian tradition, and I'm sure it shows up everywhere, you have the archetype of a deity called Murugan, who has the peacock feathers. By the way, the Archangel Michael has peacock feathers. It's quite fascinating. He's the one who chased out the Asuras out of heaven in the Hindu tradition. And he's the one who's also the god of medicine. So medicine and healing are quite interrelated. So I find myself, when I looked at my own journey, someone who grew up looking at the caste system, getting interested in politics and fighting, and also my interest in medicine, it took me a while to realize they're totally interconnected, right? Fighting for right and healing are totally connected. But what has happened is they split it, right? So you have the yoga people here thinking that they're better than everyone, doing their meditation, and you should be nonviolent and all this crap. And over here, the people who want their guns and protection, they must be violent people. And these people look at, but it's actually a fake dialectic that's been created. And that's part of the thing is, so when we do our talks and our training, we go back into this fundamental systems theory, and you can apply that same systems theory to your body as a system. You can apply that same systems theory to understanding political systems. It's the same thing. Truth, freedom, and health is the same as transport, conversion, and storage from systems theory. It is the same as Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which is very interesting words from Indian Ayurvedic theory. They're all the same. That's what's fascinating here. So when we say truth, freedom, and health, it's not a slogan. It is actually founded on universal law, whether you existed or humans existed or not. So why not build a movement, a systems movement, based on the right framework? Otherwise, you're sort of, 2%, 1% off on hitting that atom, you don't get any fission reaction. There's not too many areas that there's not a lot of room for error here. That's why I implore people, if you're serious, you have to get on board. We've created the infrastructure for people.
There we go, everyone. So, Dr. Shiva, I'm going to allow you to, finish this off by letting everyone know again how they can find, how they can become a part of this. Just before we say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah. So everyone, I think the main thing people can do is, if you first of all need to make a decision, do you want to change the world? This is a very critical decision everyone creates. Do you want to change the world, or do you accept it the way it is? So let's say you choose a path, you want to see significant change. The next question comes, do you believe in the left and right? Are you going to waste your time there? Or do you want to build a bottoms-up movement? Okay, that's the next decision. Now, if you decide you want to build a bottoms-up movement, then you must understand that there is, just like building a bridge, just like building an airplane, just like building anything, there is a physics and a science. And that's what I've discovered. And where you can go to learn that is go to vashiva.com/join. And when you go there, the reciprocity here is you commit to getting educated, and whatever you contribute to, I give you gifts of education, and you can commit whatever way you want. And if you don't want to commit to anything, we've created an environment where you can get access to videos, you can connect with other people, you could join. Because the bottom line is you need to start being in an environment where you understand that there is a system science. And go to vashiva.com/join. That's a goal, and become a truth, freedom, and health warrior.
There you go, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Thanks everyone for watching. You could see the passion there. You could, this is important stuff. So
yeah, contribute to you. When you support this,
that's right.
Do it for yourself. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for any. Do it to recognize that you need to do it for yourself. Stop watching TV, WWF wrestling, unless you want to do it for entertainment. Do it for you there, but do it for yourself. Watch it as entertainment. Don't do it as though those guys are going to change anything. They won't. Thank you, John. Good speaking with you.
Thanks. And on that note, take care, everyone. And we'll see you next episode. Cheers.